This is Pastor Stephen. Thank you for listening to the Daily Devo. Today I'm going to talk about a 7-year week. What's all this about? Text is Matthew chapter 24, verses 15 through 22, particularly verse 15. So, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who's on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house. Go and stay away, don't come back. Let the one who's in the field not return back to his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants, in those days, it's going to be bad. Pray that your flight does not occur during the winter or on the Sabbath. Jesus said in verse 21, for then there'll be great tribulation, such as not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be again. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. For the sake of the elect, those days are cut short. What a passage. I'm moving through this passage very slowly. It's because there's so much text in this context. There's so much to dissect. I know some of you don't follow me every day, and I'm trying to keep the audience up to speed with where we're at in this study, not to get lost. And I believe also that review and repetition is pretty good for our minds and our thought processes. So one of the most difficult things to explain regarding the tribulation is when the temple is going to be built and how it's going to be built. Now, a few episodes back, I talked about this, but I'm going to include in this blog a link, just in case you missed it, so you can go and review this. But obviously, the temple sacrifices have come to an end, and they need to be reinstated before all this is going to happen. In Israel today, there's no holy temple, not currently. This poses a problem right away. So where's the temple going to be? It's said to be right in the middle of the Mosque of Omar. In order for Daniel's prophecy, the abomination of desolation to occur, the Jewish temple has to be in operation in Jerusalem. There's a lot of discussion about this. There's a lot of controversy over this. And where's the temple going to be? How is it going to be built? So forth and so on. I believe it's very likely that the covenant with the Antichrist that the Jewish people makes it possible for the rebuilding of the temple to take place beside the Dome of the Rock. That's what I've always believed. But recently I've discovered that they've built a museum under the dome as a temple. Now, you didn't know there was a museum? I didn't either. Not until recently, but there is. So check out the notes, check out the link, watch the video for yourself. But it's clear from the scriptures that the Antichrist, whom Daniel calls as prince, Paul refers to him as the man of sin or perdition. John describes him as the beast. But however the Bible refers to him, this man, known to us as the Antichrist, he's going to make a covenant with Israel for 7 years. When you read Daniel 9:27, the prophet said that the Antichrist would confirm a covenant with Israel for a week. Now, how do we get a 7-year period out of a week? I thought a week was 7 days. So how is John's 7 years that he saw in Revelation the same as Daniel's week that he saw over in Daniel several hundred years before Christ was born? Well, for starters, the Jews didn't have a term for a 7-year span. So they used the word week. The angel Gabriel approaches Daniel in the latter half of the 9th chapter. And after Daniel prays for Israel, Gabriel mentioned 70 weeks or 70 sevens. This was going to take place before God put an end to sin, bringing about an everlasting righteousness. This is described in Daniel chapter 9. Particularly pay attention to verse 24. Now, scholars primarily agree that sevens appear to mean years. Therefore, 70 times 7, 490 years. Although Christians typically refer to this period of God bringing everlasting righteousness as 70 weeks, but what we really mean is 70 times 7. So 70 weeks, 70 years, 490 years. this prophecy divided up into several ways, but let me just share with you a couple. Number one, 49 years, 7 times 7. It's a time that it took the Jews to rebuild the temple since the Babylonians destroyed it. Daniel chapter 9, verse 25. It occurs all throughout the book of Nehemiah. 434 years, 62 times 7. A time designated, designed, waiting for the anointed one to come. Daniel 9:26. The anointed one is the real Messiah, Jesus Christ. After those 434 years take place, they put the anointed one to death. They destroy the city. First half of this alludes to Jesus Christ on the cross, dying. The Romans destroyed the temple in 70 A.D., which had been rebuilt by Nehemiah. And so there only is 1 week left, one set of 7. It's the last set, 1 times 7, usually referred to as the tribulation period, which I think transpires in the book of Revelation. The Antichrist emerges, he persecutes the Christians, and Jesus returns at the end of that set of 7 as his second coming. Now, to be fair, theologians dispute whether this has already taken place. There are some that dispute this. But I'm working from the assumption that we have a year gap, a 69-70 gap, and in this gap there is a church age. This is the age of grace, and I'm working from the understanding that we've not yet reached that 70th week. So in short, and I'm going to try to keep it short and try to keep it simple, this Antichrist is going to make a 7-year peace covenant, or a last week between that 69 and 70th week. I believe in our day it's hard to imagine the Muslims in the Middle East ever allowing the temple to be rebuilt. That's always been hard for me in my mindset to understand how that's going to allow to be happen in the place of the Mosque of Omar. But it's obvious to me from reading Scripture that the Antichrist is going to negotiate some kind of a solution to the rebuilding of the temple. Perhaps he even makes it happen and facilitates it. He establishes animal sacrifices. They already have the red heifer. It's ready to go. These sacrifices are going to continue until the abomination of desolation, when the Antichrist steps in and makes it all stop. Now, why would he allow these sacrifices in the first place if he's going to only stop them later? What could the purpose be? I think there's a possibility. I think it's what we see in Revelation. He wants to be the center of the religious experience. He wants to control all the religious experiences. See, John sees a vision of a whore, a false church that the Antichrist sets up to replace the true church. And keep in mind, God did everything in a righteous way, but Satan comes in and he tries to copy that and duplicate that in a demonic way. And so both the Old Testament and the New Testament testify to the fact that the temple is going to be rebuilt. The temple must be rebuilt for these prophecies to occur. Paul tells us that the Antichrist is going to sit in the temple of God. That's a very clear prophecy. When he declares that he is divine, when he declares that abomination of desolation, and when he expects all the world to bow down to him, he's going to be in the temple. John explains that all the world's going to worship him, and that mankind's going to be required to bow down at his image or suffer the pain of death. There's no doubt in my mind these things are going to occur. I just don't know when. I wish I did. I wish I could tell you, but I don't. I can't. I'm watching these world events unfold before our eyes, and I'm scratching my head. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But as I understand Scripture, Israel's going to be duped. They're going to be duped into believing that the Antichrist is their Messiah. And it's only 3.5 years into that the abomination of desolation occurs. The Jews realize they put their hope in a false Messiah, and they are doomed. Muslims are going to view him as the Imam Mahdi, which is interesting. They're going to see him as the Messiah, their Messiah. The world's leaders and religious leaders are going to unite under this charismatic leadership. The world's religion, the economic powers, the world's nations, they're all going to come under his leadership just long enough for a peaceful covenant to be made. Long enough for them to be deceived. Long enough for him to grab all control, monetarily, religiously, and economically, and in the world empires. But Jesus describes that this is going to be a day unlike any other, and in my prophetic opinion, it's the Antichrist who's going to become the religious and economic center of the world. Be careful, watch out. This is Pastor Steve, and we'll see you tomorrow.